guys. Welcome back to week 3 of our virtual read-along book club of Kate DiCamillo's Flora and Ulysses. Last week we read up to chapter 20 and we finished the first 4 chapter sections, which means today we're going to be starting with chapter 21, which is in the 5th chapter section in our book. In case you're new to the club, you can find all of our past videos on the Sayville Library Facebook or YouTube channel, Facebook page or YouTube channel, and we do all of our reading on Tumblebooks. So I will show you how to access that library resource right now, and then we'll jump right into our reading. Okay, so we start on the Sayville Library homepage, which is sayvillelibrary.org, and we're going to jump directly to the Children's tab. And on here, we see a little tree, just like the tree we have in person at the library. We're going to click on Tumblebooks. So this will bring us to the direct Sayville Library patron link. We go to eBooks. And because Kate DiCamillo is a featured author, she's right at the very top. And Flora and Ulysses, our book, is the second option. We're going to click on that. We're going to hit Read Online. And then we have our cover. So I keep talking about different sections and chapters. So just for ease of like flipping through different chapters in the book, they've broken it into chapter sections. And for the sake of breaking our 7-week program into different sections, we just read 2 chapter sections of a video. So like I said, last time we read up to chapter 20. So today we're going to start with chapter 21. And just a little thing about using Tumblebooks is sometimes the very first chapter in a chapter section, the tippy top gets cut off. So it doesn't always tell us what the chapter title is, which I mentioned last week isn't super essential to know what's going on in the story, but it always helps. And since I do have the physical copy here with me, I can let you know that chapter 21 is titled Poetry. So when we left off last week with chapter 20, Ulysses had proven to us that he sort of typed a poem. He typed a little bit about Flora to prove that he could type. So chapter 21. They were sitting in Tootie's office. Tootie was on the couch with a package of frozen peas on her head. She had fainted. Unfortunately, she had hit her head on the edge of the desk on the way down. Fortunately, Flora had remembered an issue of terrible things can happen to you, advising that a frag of frozen peas made an excellent cold compress to provide comfort and reduce swelling. Read it one more time, said William Spiver to Flora. Flora read Ulysses' words aloud again. The squirrel wrote poetry, said Tootie in a voice filled with wonder. Keep those peas on your head, said Flora. I don't get that last part, said William Spiver. The part about hunger. What does that mean? Flora turned away from the computer and looked at William Spiver's dark glasses and saw again her round-headed, pajamaed self reflected there. It means he's hungry, she said. He hasn't had any breakfast. Oh, said William Spiver. I see. It's literal. Ulysses was sitting on his hind legs beside the computer. He nodded hopefully. It's poetry, said Tootie from the couch. Ulysses puffed out his chest the teeniest bit. Well, it might be poetry, said William Spiver, but it's not great poetry. It's not even good poetry. But what does it all mean, said Tootie. Why does it have to mean something, said William Spiver. The universe is a random place. Oh, for heaven's sake, William, said Tootie. Flora felt something well up inside her. What was it? Pride in the squirrel? Annoyance at William Spiver? Wonder? Hope? Suddenly she remembered the words that appeared over Alfred P. Slipper's head when he was submerged in a vat of incandesto. Do you doubt him? Do not. Do you doubt him? Said Flora. Of course I doubt him, said William Spiver. Do not, said Flora. Why? Said William Spiver. She stared at him. Take off your glasses, she said. I want to see your eyes. No, said William Spiver. Take them off. I won't. Children, said Tootie, please. Who was William Spiver really? Yes, he was the great nephew of Tootie Tickum, suddenly, suspiciously, come to stay the summer. But who was he really? What if he was some kind of comic book character himself? What if he was a villain whose powers were depleted as soon as the light of the world hit his eyes? Incandesto was forever being attacked by his arch nemesis, the darkness of 10,000 hands. Every superhero had an arch nemesis. What if Ulysses' arch nemesis was William Spiver? The truth must be known, said Flora. She stepped forward. She reached out her hand to remove William Spiver's glasses, and then she heard her name. Flora Bell! Your father is here! Flora Bell, said William Spiver in a gentle voice. Ulysses was still sitting on his hind legs. His ears were pricked. He looked back and forth between Flora and William Spiver. We have to go, said Flora. Wait, said William Spiver. Flora picked Ulysses up by the scruff of his neck. She put him under her pajama top. Will I ever see you again? Said William Spiver. The universe is a random place, William Spiver, said Flora. We can stay. Who can say whether we will meet again or not? Chapter 22, A Giant Ear. Her father was standing on the top step in front of the open door. He was wearing a dark suit and a tie and a hat with a brim, even though it was Saturday and summertime. Flora's father was an accountant at the firm in Clinton, Watson, and Frick. Flora wasn't sure, but she thought it was possible that her father was the world's loneliest man. He didn't even have Incandesto and Dolores to keep him company anymore. Hi, Pop, she said. Flora, said her father. He smiled at her, and then he sighed. I'm not ready yet. Oh, that's okay, said her father. He sighed again. I'll wait. He walked with Flora into the living room. He sat down on the couch. He took off his hat and balanced it on his knee. Are you in the house now, George? Flora's mother shouted from the kitchen. Is Flora with you? I'm inside, shouted Flora's father. Flora is with me. The clack, clack, clack of the typewriter echoed through the house. Silverware rattled, and then there was silence. What are you doing here, George? Her mother shouted. I'm sitting on the couch, Phyllis. I'm waiting for my daughter. Flora's father moved his hat from his left knee to his right knee, and then back to his left knee again. Ulysses shifted underneath Flora's pajamas. What are you two going to do today? Flora's mother shouted. I don't know, Phyllis. I can hear you perfectly well, George, said Flora's mother as she came into the living room. You don't need to shout. Flora, what have you got under your pajama top? Nothing, said Flora. Is that the squirrel? Is it that squirrel? No, said Flora. What squirrel? Said Flora's father. Don't lie to me, said her mother. Okay, said Flora. It's the squirrel. I'm keeping him. I knew it. I knew you were hiding something. Listen to me. That squirrel is diseased. You are engaging in dangerous behavior. Flora turned away. She had a superhero under her pajamas. She didn't have to listen to her mother, or anybody else for that matter. A new day was dawning, a girl with a superhero kind of day. I'm going to go change now, she said. This will not work, Florabelle, said her mother. That squirrel is not staying. What squirrel? Said Flora's father again. Flora went halfway up the stairs, but then she stopped. She stood on the landing. The criminal element suggested that anyone truly invested in fighting crime, investing criminals, should learn to listen carefully. All words at all times, true or false, whispered or shouted, are clues to the workings of the human heart. Listen, you must, if you care to understand anything at all, become a giant ear. That was what the criminal element suggested, and that was what Flora intended to do. She pulled Ulysses out from underneath her pajama top. Sit on my shoulder, she whispered to him. Ulysses climbed up her shoulder. Listen, she said. He nodded. Flora felt brave and capable, standing there on the landing with her squirrel on her shoulder. Do not hope, she whispered. Instead, observe. She took a deep breath and let it out slowly. She held herself absolutely still. She became a giant ear. And what Flora, the giant ear, heard was astonishing. Chapter 23. Enter the villain. George, said Flora's mother, we have a problem. Your daughter has become emotionally attached to a diseased squirrel. How's that? Said Flora's father. There's a squirrel, said her mother, speaking more slowly now, as if she were pointing at each word as she said it. There's a squirrel, repeated her father. The squirrel is not well. There's an unwell squirrel. There's a sack in the garage and a shovel. Okay, said Flora's father. There's a sack in the garage and a shovel in the garage. At this point, there was a very long silence. I need you to put the squirrel out of its misery, said Flora's mother. How's that? Said her father. For the love of Pete, George, shouted her mother. Put the squirrel in the sack and then hit him over the head with the shovel. Flora's father gasped. Flora gasped too. She was surprised at herself. The ladies in her mother's romance novels put their hands on their bosoms and gasped, but Flora was not a gasper. She was a cynic. Flora's father said, I don't understand. Flora's mother cleared her throat. She uttered the blood-soaked words again. She said them louder. She said them more slowly. You put the squirrel in the sack, George. You hit the squirrel over the head with the shovel. She paused. And then, she said, you used the shovel to bury the squirrel. Put the squirrel in the sack? Hit the squirrel over the head with a shovel? Said Flora's father in a squeaky, despairing voice. Oh, Phyllis! Oh, Phyllis! No! Yes, said Flora's mother. It's the humane thing to do. Flora understood that she had made a mistake in thinking that William Spiver was anybody important. Everything was coming into sharp and terrifying focus. The story was starting to make sense. Ulysses was a superhero, probably, and Phyllis Buckman was his arch nemesis. Definitely. Wholly unanticipated occurrences. And now we have Flora's parents. Her dad with his hat that he keeps moving around. And we can't forget about Marianne over in the corner. Chapter 24. Stalked, chased, threatened, poisoned, etc. He should have been shocked, but he wasn't. Not really. It was a sad fact of his existence as a squirrel that there was always someone, somewhere, who wanted him dead. In his short life, Ulysses had been stalked by cats, attacked by raccoons, and shot with BB guns, slingshots, and a bow and arrow. Granted, the arrow was made of rubber, but still, it could hurt. He had been shouted at, threatened, and poisoned. He had been flung ears over tail by the stream of water issuing from a garden hose turned to full force. Once, at a public picnic ground, a small girl had tried to beat him to death with her enormous teddy bear, and last fall, a pickup truck had run over his tail. Truthfully, the possibility of getting hit over the head with a shovel didn't seem that alarming. Life was dangerous, particularly if you were a squirrel. In any case, he wasn't thinking about dying. He was thinking about poetry. That is what Tootie said he had written. Poetry. He liked the word. Its smallness, its density, the way it rose up at the end as if it had wings. Poetry. Don't worry, said Flora. You're a superhero. This malfeasance will be stopped. Ulysses dug his claws into Flora's pajamas to keep his balance on her shoulder. Malfeasance, said Flora again. Poetry, thought Ulysses. Myself, you can still see them. But right in between these two chapters, we have Flora with Ulysses on her shoulder. Flora looks angry. She's obviously thinking about malfeasance. And Ulysses looks nice and dreamy, and he's over there thinking about poetry. Okay, chapter 25, Feel Blubber. Flora's father's car seat smelled like butterscotch and ketchup, and Flora was in the back seat, where the smell of butterscotch and ketchup was the most powerful. She had a bootsy-bot shoebox with Ulysses on it in her lap, and she was feeling carsick even though the car wasn't moving yet. She was also feeling the tiniest bit overwhelmed. Things, in general, were pretty confusing. For instance, here was Ulysses, sitting in a shoebox, knowing that there was a shovel in the trunk of the car, and that the man driving the car had been instructed to whack him over the head with the shovel, and the squirrel didn't look worried or afraid. He looked happy. And then there was Flora's mother, the person who had given Flora the shoebox, to protect her little friend on his journey. We'll just put this washcloth in here as a comfy blanket. She was standing at the door, smiling and waving goodbye to them as if she weren't truly a murder-planning arch nemesis. Talk about the darkness of 10,000 hands. Nothing was as it seemed. Flora looked down at the squirrel. Of course, he was not what he seemed either, and that was a good thing, an incandesto thing. Flora felt a shiver of belief, of possibility pass through her. Her parents had no idea what kind of squirrel they were dealing with. Her father put the car in reverse, and as he backed out of the driveway, Flora saw William Sayville standing in Tootie's front yard. He was looking up at the sky. He turned his head slowly in the direction of the car. His glasses flashed in the sun. Tootie appeared. She was waving one of the pink gloves as if it were a flag of surrender. Stop the car! She shouted. Step on the gas, Flora said to her father. She did not want to talk to Tootie, and she definitely did not want to talk to William Sayville. She didn't want to see herself reflected in his dark glasses. She had her own thoughts about the random and confusing nature of the universe. She didn't need his, too. Also, she was in a hurry. There was a murder to stop, a superhero to mentor, villains to vanquish, darkness to eradicate. She couldn't waste time trading stupid thoughts with William Sayville. Flora Belle, shouted William Sayville, almost as if he were reading her mind. I've had some interesting thoughts. He ran toward the car and fell into the bushes. Great Aunt Tootie, he shouted. I need your assistance. What in the world is going on, said her father. He slammed on the brakes. It's just a temporarily blind boy, said Flora, and Mrs. Kickham from next door. She's his aunt, his great aunt. Never mind. It doesn't make any difference. Keep going. But it was too late. Tootie had helped William Sayville out of the bushes, and the two of them were walking toward the car. William Sayville was smiling. Hello, her father called out to them. I'm George Buckman. How do you do? Flora's father introduced himself to everyone all the time, even if the person was someone he had already met. It was an annoying and extremely persistent habit. Hello, sir, said William Sayville. I am William Sayville. I would like to speak to your daughter, Flora Belle. I don't have time to talk to you right now, William Sayville, said Flora. Great Aunt Tootie, can you assist me? Will you take me to Flora's side of the vehicle? Please excuse me while I escort this extremely disturbed and neurotic child to the other side of the car, said Tootie. Certainly, certainly, said Flora's father, and then he said to absolutely no one, George Buckman, how do you do? Flora sighed. She looked down at Ulysses. Considering the human beings she was surrounded by, believing in a squirrel seemed like an increasingly reasonable plan of action. I wanted to apologize, said William Spiver, who was now standing beside her window. For what? Said Flora. It wasn't the worst poetry I had ever heard. Oh, said Flora. Also, I'm sorry that I wouldn't take my glasses off when you asked me to. Take them off now then, said Flora. I can't, said William Spiver. They've been glued to my head by evil forces beyond my control. You lie, said Flora. Yeah. No, I don't. I do. I'm engaging in hyperbole. It seems as if the glasses have been glued to my head. He lowered his voice. Actually, I'm afraid that if I take my glasses off, the whole world will unravel. That's stupid, said Flora. There are bigger things to worry about. For instance, Flora realized that she was going to say something to William Spiver that she hadn't intended to say. The words were out of her mouth before she could stop them. Do you know what an arch nemesis is? She whispered. Of course I do. William Spiver whispered back. Said Flora. Well, Ulysses has got one. It's my mother. William Spiver's eyebrows rose up above his dark glasses. Flora was pleased to note that he looked properly surprised and shocked. Speaking of Ulysses, said Tootie, I have some poetry that I would like to recite to him. Are you sure that now is the time for a poetry recitation? Said William Spiver. Ulysses sat up straighter in his bootsy box shoebox. He looked at Tootie. He nodded. I was moved by your poetry, said Tootie to the squirrel. Ulysses puffed out his chest. And I have some poetry that I would like to recite to you in honor of the recent transformation in your life. Tootie put her hand on her chest. This is Rocky, she said. You, sent out beyond your recall, go to the limits of your longing, embody me, flare up like flame, and make shadows I can move in. Ulysses stared up at Tootie, his eyes bright. Flare up like flame, said Flora's father from the front seat. That is moving, yes. That is quite lovely, flaring up like flame. Thank you so much. We have to be on our way now. But will you return? Said William Spiver. Flora looked up and saw William Spiver's words hanging in the air above him like a small, tattered flag. But will you return? I'm just spending the afternoon with my father, William Spiver, she said. It's not like I'm heading off to the South Pole. Terrible things can happen to you had done an extensive piece on what to do if you were stranded at the South Pole. Their advice would be summed up in 3 simple words: eat seal blubber. It was astonishing, really, what people could live through. Flora felt cheered up all of a sudden, just thinking about eating seal blubber and doing impossible things, surviving when the odds were against her and her squirrel. They would figure out a way to outwit the arch nemesis. They would triumph over the shovel and the sack, and they would triumph together, like Dolores and Incandesto. I'm glad, William Spiver. I'm glad that you're not going to the South Pole, Flora Belle. Flora's father cleared his throat. George Buckman, he said, how do you do? It was nice to meet you, sir, said William Spiver. Remember those words, said Tootie. Flare up like flame, said Flora's father. I was speaking to the squirrel, said Tootie. Of course, said Flora's father. My apologies, the squirrel. I will see you again, said William Spiver. Beware the arch nemesis, said Flora. I will see you again, said William Spiver. We're off to fight evil, said Flora, as her father backed the car out of the driveway. William Spiver waved at the car. I will see you again. He seemed so stuck on the idea of seeing her again that Flora didn't have the heart to tell him that he was waving in the wrong direction. And that's the end of this section. So now we're going to jump to chapter 26. And just like before, the top part of the chapter is a little bit cut off, but I do still have my book right here with me. And I'm going to open that up to chapter 26. And the chapter title of this chapter is Spies Don't Cry. Flora's father was a careful driver. He kept his left hand at 10 o'clock on the steering wheel and his right hand at 2. He never took his eyes off the road. He did not go fast. Speed, her father often said, that is what will kill you. That and taking your eyes off the road. Never, ever take your eyes off the road. Pop, said Flora. I need to talk to you. Okay, said her father. He kept his eyes on the road. About what? That sack and that shovel. What sack, said her father. What shovel? It occurred to Flora that her father would make an excellent spy. He never really answered questions. Instead, when asked a question, he simply responded with a nifty sidestep or a question of his own. When her parents were getting their divorce, Flora had a conversation with her father that went something like this. Flora, are you and Mom getting divorced? Flora's father, who says we're getting divorced? Flora, Mom. Flora's father, is that what she said? Flora, that's what she said. Flora's father, I wonder why she said that. And then he started to cry. I probably didn't cry, but still, there's a sack and a shovel in the trunk of the car, Pop, said Flora. Is there? Said her father. I saw you put them in there. It's true. did put a sack and a shovel in the trunk of the car. The criminal element said that it was a good idea to engage in relentless, open-ended questioning. Relentless and open-ended questioning. If you question with enough ferocity, people are sometimes surprised into answering questions that they do not intend to answer. When in doubt, question. Question more, question faster. Why? Said Flora. I intend to dig a hole, said her father. For what? A thing that I'm going to bury. What thing are you going to bury? A sack. Why are you burying a sack? Because your mother asked me to. Why did she ask you to bury a sack? Her father tapped his fingers on the steering wheel. He stared straight ahead. Why did she ask me to bury a sack? Why did she ask me to bury a sack? That's a good one. Hey, I know. Do you want to get something to eat? What? Said Flora. How about some lunch? Said her father. For the love of Pete, said Flora. Or some breakfast. How about we stop and eat a meal? Any meal. Flora sighed. The criminal element advised stalling, delaying, and obfuscation of any possible sort when it came to dealing with a criminal. Her father wasn't a criminal, not exactly, but he had been enlisted in the service of villainy. Basically, he was in cahoots with an arch nemesis. So maybe it would be good to stall, to delay the inevitable showdown by just going into a restaurant. Besides, the squirrel was hungry and he would need to be strong for the battle ahead. Okay, said Flora. Okay, sure, let's eat. Chapter 27. The world in all its smelly glory. Okay, sure, let's eat. What wonderful words those are, thought Ulysses. Let's eat. Talk about poetry. The squirrel was happy. It was happy because he was with Flora. He was happy because he had the words from Tootie's poem flowing through his head and heart. He was happy because he was going to be fed soon. And he was happy because he was, well, happy. He climbed out of the shoebox and put his front paws on the door and his nose to the open window. He was a squirrel riding in a car on a summer day with someone he loved. His whiskers and nose were in the breeze, and there were so many smells. Overflowing trash cans, just cut grass, sun-warmed patches of pavement, the loamy richness of dirt, earthworms, loamy smelling too, but often difficult to distinguish from the smell of dirt. Dog, more dog, dog again. Oh, dog. Small dogs, large dogs. The torturing of dogs was the one reliable pleasure of a squirrel's existence. The tang of fertilizer, a faint whiff of birdseed, something baking, the hidden hint of nuttiness. Pecan, acorn, the small apologetic don't mind me odor of mouse, and the ruthless stench of cat. Cats were terrible. Cats were never to be trusted. Never. The world in all its smelly glory, in all its treachery and joy and nuttiness, washed over Ulysses, ran through him, filled him. He could smell everything. He could even smell the blue of the sky. He wanted to capture it. He wanted to write it down. He wanted to tell Flora. He looked and looked at her. Keep your eyes open for malfeasance, she said to him. Ulysses nodded. The words from Tootie's poem sounded in his head. Flare up like flame. Yes, he thought, that's what I'll do. I'll flare up like flame and I'll write it all down. Chapter 28, The Giant Donut. You'll have to leave the squirrel in the car, said Flora's father as he pulled into the parking lot of the Giant Donut. No, said Flora, it's too hot. I'll leave the windows down, said her father. Someone will steal him. You think someone will steal him? Her father sounded doubtful, but hopeful. Who would steal a squirrel? A criminal, said Flora. The criminal element spoke often and passionately about the nefarious activities that every human being is capable of. Not only did it insist that the human heart was dark beyond all reckoning, it also likened the heart to a river. And further, it said, if we are not careful, the river can carry us along its hidden currents and want and anger and need, and transform each of us into the very criminal we fear. The human heart is a deep, dark river with hidden currents, Flora said to her father. Criminals are everywhere. Her father tapped his fingers on the steering wheel. I wish I could disagree with you, but I can't. Ulysses sneezed. Bless you, said her father. I'm not leaving him, said Flora. Alfred T. Flipper took his parakeet, Dolores, with him everywhere, sometimes even to the offices of the Pawtucket Life Insurance Company. Not without my parakeet, that was what Alfred said. Not without my squirrel, said Flora. If her father recognized the sentence, if the words reminded him of their time together reading about Incandesto, he didn't show it. He merely sighed. Bring him in then, he said, but keep the lid on the shoebox. Ulysses climbed into the shoebox, and Flora dutifully lowered the lid on his small face. Okay, she said. All right. She climbed out of the car, and then she stood and looked up at the giant donut sign. Giant donuts inside, the sign screamed in neon letters, while an extremely large donut disappeared over and over again into a cup of coffee. But there was no hand on the donut. Who, Flora wondered, is doing the dunking? A small shiver ran down her spine. What if we are all donuts just waiting to be dunked, she thought. It was the kind of question that William Spiber would ask. She could hear him asking it. It was also the kind of question that William Stuyver would have an answer for. That was the thing about William Stuyver. He always had an answer, even if it was an annoying one. Listen to me, she whispered to the shoebox. You are not a donut waiting to be dunked. You are a superhero. Do not let yourself be tricked or fooled. Remember the shovel. Keep an eye on George Buckman. Her father got out of the car. He put his hands in his pockets and jingled the change. Sally, he said. Scowl, delay, obfuscate. Let's, said Flora. Chapter 29, Coochie Coo. The giant donuts smelled like fried eggs and donuts and other people's closets. The dining room was full of laughter and donut dunking. A waitress sat Flora and her father at a booth in the corner and handed them glossy, enormous menus. Flora surreptitiously, the criminal element recommended surreptitious action at all possible junctures, removed the lid from the shoebox. Ulysses poked his head out and looked around the restaurant, and then he turned his attention to the menu. He stared at it with a dreamy look on his face. Get whatever you want, said Flora's father. Order your heart's desire. Ulysses emitted a happy sigh. Pay attention, whispered Flora. A waitress came and stood over them. She tapped her pencil on the order pad. What can I get you? She said. Her name tag spelled out her name in all capital letters. R-I-T-A. Rita. Flora narrowed her eyes. The exclamation point made Rita seem untrustworthy, or at the very least, insincere. Well, said Rita, what's it going to be? Her hair was piled up very, very high on her head. She looked like Marie Antoinette. Not that Flora had ever seen Marie Antoinette, but she had read about her in a Terrible Things Can Happen to You issue on the French Revolution. Marie Antoinette, from the little bit that Flora knew about her, would have made a very bad waitress. Flora suddenly remembered that she had a squirrel in her lap. She tapped Ulysses on the head again. Lie low, she whispered to him, to be prepared. She arranged the washcloth so that he was almost completely hidden. What you got there? Asked Rita. Where? Said Flora. In the box, said Rita. Got a baby doll in the box? Are you talking to your baby doll? Talking to my baby doll, said Flora. She felt a flush of orange crawl up her cheeks. For the love of Pete, she was 10 years old, almost 11. She knew how to administer CPR. She knew how to outwit an arch nemesis. She was acquainted with the profound importance of steel blubber. She was the sidekick to a superhero. Plus, she was a cynic. What self-respecting cynic would carry around a baby doll in a shoebox? I do not, said Flora, have a baby doll. Let me see her, said Rita. Don't be shy. She bent over. Her big Marie Antoinette hair scraped against Flora's chin. No, said Flora. George Buckman, said Flora's father in a worried voice. How do you do? Coochie coo, said Rita. Flora felt a very pointed, very specific sense of doom. Rita poked her pencil into the shoebox. Slowly, slowly, she pushed the washcloth around, slowly, and the washcloth, oh, so slowly, fell back and revealed Ulysses' whiskered face. George Buckman, said her father in a much louder voice. How do you do? Rita screamed, a long and impossibly loud scream. Ulysses screamed in return, and then he left from the shoebox. At this point, things stopped proceeding at a leisurely pace. The squirrel was airborne, and time swung back into action with a vengeance. At last, thought Flora, it's incandesto time. Chapter 30, Sunny Side Up. He had never been so frightened in his life. Never. The woman's face was monstrous, and the word on her name tag, Rita, appeared monstrous to him too. Be calm, he told himself as she poked her pencil around. He held himself as still as he could. But then Rita screamed. And it was absolutely impossible not to answer her long, piercing shriek with a piercing shriek of his own. She screamed, he screamed, and then every one of his animal instincts kicked in. He acted without thinking. He tried to escape. He left from the box and ended up somehow exactly where he did not want to be, in the middle of the monstrous hair. Rita jumped up and down. She put her hands on her head. She swatted and clawed, trying to dislodge him. The harder she hit him, the higher she jumped, the more fiercely the squirrel clung. In this way, Rita and Ulysses danced together around the giant donut. What's happening? Someone shouted. Her hair is on fire, someone answered. No, there's something in her hair, another person shouted, and it's alive. Ah! Screamed Rita. Help me! How, Ulysses wondered, had things gone so wrong? Only moments ago, he had been looking at the giant donut menu, captivated by the glossy pictures of food and the dazzling descriptions that accompanied the pictures. There were giant donuts sprinkles, giant donuts powdered, iced, giant donuts filled with things, jelly, cream, chocolate. He had never had a giant donut. Actually, he had never had any kind of donut. They looked delicious, all of them. How was a squirrel to choose? And to complicate matters, there were eggs, scrambled, poached, over easy, sunny side up, thought Ulysses as he clung to Rita's hair. What a wonderful phrase. And then we have Ulysses. in Rita's monstrous hair, and we see her giant all caps name tag, and someone's coming. A man emerged from the kitchen. He had on a gigantic white hat, and he was holding something metal that flashed in the overhead lights of the giant donut. It was a knife. Help me! Screamed Rita. And me, thought Ulysses. Help me too! But he was quite certain that the man with the knife had no intention of helping him. And then he heard Flora's voice. He couldn't see her because Rita was now spinning around, and everything in the restaurant had become somewhat blurred. All the faces had become one face. All the screams had become one scream. But Flora's voice stood out. It was the voice of the person he loved. He concentrated on her words. He worked to understand her. Ulysses, she shouted. Ulysses, remember who you are. Remember who he was? Who was he? As if Flora had heard his unspoken question, she answered him, You're Ulysses. That's right, he thought. I am. Act, shouted Flora. This was good advice. Flora was absolutely right. He was Ulysses, and he must act. The man with the knife stepped toward Rita. Ulysses loosened his hold on her hair. He leapt again. This time, he leapt with purpose and intent. He leapt with all his strength. He flew. And that is the end of chapter 30. Tune in next week to find out what happens. So now we know that Ulysses can type and he can fly. Bye.